So it is the post-match for the Notts Forest and Liverpool game. Nottingham Forest 1, Liverpool 0. Not what we expected or talked about in the Monday and Thursday podcasts, but that's what we got today. The bottom team, the worst team in the league, have beaten us. It was a weird game, really sluggish, almost like we had played a game yesterday and the players were tired. We had a strange lineup in terms of who was available. No Nunes, no Thiago. Milner at right back instead of Arnold. We had Curtis Jones, who's just coming back from injury, in midfield with Harvey Elliott and Fabinho. And then Carvalho, Firmino and Salah up front, back to that old 4-3-3. It looked like a little bit maybe 4-2-3-1, but whatever it was, it didn't seem to work. We looked dreadful in places. It was not a good game to watch. It was a frustrating game, as high as the Manchester City game was last week and as middling as the West Ham game was midweek. At the end of this week, this was the pits. We have problems, I think, that we haven't liked to address. We have had Klopp talking in the press about, the whole 8th year, 7th year, whatever it is, malaise that his team seem to have, and that he doesn't believe that it occurs, but it's right in front of our eyes for the evidence. So let's look at the stats from today's game. It looked even enough. Same shots on target, although for the majority of the game, Forest had outshot us for shots on target pretty much up until I think about the 70th minute. Overall shots, it was us, but we had 8 off target. We didn't bring the shooting boots today. Possession, it was almost like a home game for Liverpool in terms of how much we had the ball. 11 corner kicks to 2. 32 crosses to 6. I remember a time when we mocked David Moyes' Manchester United for the amount of crosses they had against Fulham. But today, that team was us. And 8 counterattacks to 1, which shows you how much of the ball we had and how unadventurous Nottingham Forest were. It was one of those games where you look at the tactics, you look at the lineup, you look at the bench and see who's available, and you ask, where is it going wrong in terms of the plan? So we have injuries, clearly. We don't have Jota, we didn't have Nunes, we didn't have Thiago, Konate, Matip. We're not playing with the full deck. So granted, we're not at the best of strength that we could be at, but it is Nottingham Forest, and they are bottom of the league for a reason. And we should have gotten a lot more out of that game than we did. We have comments, etc. below on the YouTube channel and the Facebook channel, so make sure you get your ideas across if you have any. But what is going wrong, people? What is going wrong for Liverpool this season? We played so well against Manchester City. It was a back-to-the-wall performance against the highest scoring team in the league. And to go from that to this performance in the space of 7 days is almost unfathomable. One point that I think should be made is that it was made in our Discord channel, which everybody should be signing up to, and it was also, I think, made on one of the BBC commentaries. We have an incredibly expensive forward. He is a top-class player, has been for years, top scorer. Is he doing enough right now? Because when we look at his stats from today, he had less touches than Virgil van Dijk by a lot, Harvey Elliott, Curtis Jones, Fabio Carvalho, who didn't even see the entire game out, Trent Alexander-Arnold, who came on as a sub, and less touches than Alisson, who was the goalkeeper. So in one sense, we can say that we played a very possession-oriented game. We probably probed a little bit too much rather than taking some risks with some passes. But in the end, we're either not getting the ball to our most dangerous player, although Firmino is our top scorer, but our most dangerous player is not either not getting the ball enough, or he's not putting himself into a position to get the ball enough, or we're just not giving him the ball for some reason. Maybe he's double marked, or maybe that position out on the wing is just nullifying him completely tactically. But something's gone wrong with Salah, and we know his quality and we can see in flashes, but there's something wrong with the effectiveness, I think, is quite obvious, because a player like Salah should be getting at least 2 goals against the worst team in the league. They had a defensive plan. They put enough numbers back behind the ball, but we had opportunities and he was in positions to get the ball and do something, especially that one over the top that dropped his feet. That almost looked like it surprised him that it would get there. But what is going wrong with Salah? We don't want to say it because it's not really true when you examine the logic of it, but he got the big contract and he's not delivering on the big contract. Has he come to the end of his physical peak and we now have to look at a different way of playing Salah? Is he getting maybe a little bit complacent, or is the whole system change to how the fullbacks play completely taking away the spaces that and the tactical runs that he has to make away from him that made him so effective for so very, very long? The end comes to us all. As it doesn't matter whether you play amateur soccer or play professional soccer, at some point the legs go, the connection between what you see and how you react and what your feet actually do, it erodes. Anybody who's played even pub league football like me will know that feeling. It's just everything just gets a little bit faster for you and your body just gets a tiny bit slower. Is he not able to use that pace anymore, or is there something else wrong? Is it something mental? Is the change of the players behind him, almost like we're developing that new team under Klopp, is that affecting how he plays? Because he doesn't have the telepathy with Firmino because he's not in every game, and he doesn't have we don't call it telepathy because there was that controversy about whether they passed each other or not, but at least Mane and Salah had a kind of relationship going where they almost instinctively knew where each other's runs were, even if they never got the ball from each other. Myth or fact, I never worked that one out, but there's something going on with our top scorer, and in a game like today, he was the one that you would expect to grab something to get us that equalizer, but it didn't happen, and as a result, we're 1-0 down. On the other hand, was it a smart decision for Klopp to take off Firmino, the club's top scorer right now, not with an awful lot of goals compared to how we usually do, but top scorer nonetheless? And as much as we might have an eye on the midweek Champions League game, we really need a point from 2 games to get into the next round, results dependent. So was it worth the risk of losing this game and just to be ready for the next Champions League game, or should we have gone for it with Firmino, kept them on the field, and maybe took the 2 young boys out, Jones and Elliott, and then maybe gone for more experience? That was a puzzler for me. I didn't understand that substitution. So if anybody has any insight into that one, we'd love to hear it. The midfield was a little bit awkward. I think Fabinho didn't have his best game. Maybe that was a game for having Henderson start and control from the back. Fabinho just kind of lost his man 1 times too many. Not his most effective performance, but he's kind of had a drop in performance level, like consistency, for a fair while, I think. And maybe it's time that we should be looking to replace Fabinho in the midfield and maybe getting somebody a little bit more, not that we could ever find it, but a Xabi Alonso-like player in there, rather than the out-and-out destroyer that Fabinho kind of becomes when he's not on his game on the ball. At the back, Joe Gomez, he's a good player, but does he need to be in WWE or MMA or something like that as well? Because he gives away an awful lot of free kicks by running into players at high speed off the ground as well. At that, does Van Dijk need a permanent partner? Because it's always either Joe Gomez or Matip or Canate. Should we be looking for somebody more physically robust in the winter transfer window to maybe start a new partnership? Or is Van Dijk coming to the end as well? Has he lost that yard of pace? Has he lost his heading ability? He had the heading ability of a cardboard box today, with the ball gone pretty much anywhere except for that really good header at the end. down into the ground, which the Forest goalkeeper was equal to with his funky throwback 70s cap. But still, a team like Forest shouldn't have been getting through with any regularity to our goalkeeper. They were 5 shots on target by, I believe, the 60th minute. And it wasn't something you would expect. You would expect us to be in full control of that game for as long as possible in that game and get something out of it. But we didn't. 1-0 loss to the worst team in the league. We have issues. We have podcasts that we could talk about. We have this, comments, etc. But it looks like there's something going on with Liverpool this season, which is either a drop off because of the intensity of the last few years, or we just haven't got our blend right in terms of bringing players in, shipping players out. Injuries not quite have been maybe a bit too kind and too generous to players, and saying, you might be injured, but you've done a good job for us, so let's see how you get back on. But it hasn't worked out because players keep getting injured, and the same players an awful lot of the time, leading to a lot of our nice in-jokes on the podcasts. But football is a cruel profession, as most team sports are. At some point, when do we say, enough is enough, it's not working, we can't get you on the field, it's time to replace you? Should Ox still be here? Naby not available again? I think Galley is I think it's Galley who says is probably correct. We're not going to see Ox or Naby in a short again. He'll probably be gone in the transfer window. But a player we can't rely on, a player who wasn't fulfilling his talent and then is consistently on the physio's treatment table, which is not good enough for a club like Liverpool and not good enough for the investment we put in that player. Do we need to look at a training method? We know they're notoriously harsh in terms of the physical fitness. And we know Klopp loves physical fitness, but it does have a price. There's a price to pay for overtraining. There's a price to pay for undertraining. It's usually on the injuries list. We don't rotate enough sometimes. I know that's a common complaint about Jurgen Klopp. We don't use the subs enough a lot of the time. That's another complaint. Is that something that he needs to look at? I think so. I think if we're going to get the 5 subs, you have to use the 5 subs. You have to. It's almost as good as rotation. You get players on, players off. You keep them fresh in games where you're able to do that. A 1-0 down with 30 minutes to go against the bottom team in the league is probably not the game to start messing around with that. You want to make tactical changes then, but you only have to make tactical changes in a game like that if you didn't get plan A right in the first place. It seems almost like we were a bit too complacent. It's the bottom team. It's only Forest. Let's put Jones and Elliott on at the same time, with Jones just coming back from injury. Instead of maybe going with Trent at right back and Milner and Henderson, which is not the most creative midfield three, but it frees up Carvalho, Firmino and Salah to do some damage up front without having to worry as much about getting back to defend, especially against a team that didn't show any attacking intent at all outside of hitting on the break. And because we had the 2 young lads who were very attack-oriented and very adventurous, we ended up leaving so many gaps for the Forest to attack in that the counter-attacks almost all ended in a shot on target, which we don't want. You're going to concede attacks in soccer, but the important thing is to make sure that when they do get a shot off, it's a poor shot and it's off target and it's out for a goal kick and not straight down at the goalkeeper's throat, that he has to do something with it. So maybe we had to think a little bit more pragmatically about that instead of complacently thinking that we had enough in a young player in Elliott, who's doing fantastic this season, but is still only a young player and is still finding his feet as well as he's been doing against big battle-hardened veterans sometimes compared to him in midfield. And then Curtis Jones, who probably still has his injury on his mind and maybe plays a little bit more reserved than he normally would because he doesn't want to be back on the treatment table 3 games after coming back into it. So maybe not the best decision from Klopp there in terms of getting the results. The intent was probably correct. You want the young lads to know there's a place on the team for them, but it just smacked a little bit of overconfidence because it was a tough game against West Ham. It wasn't the best, prettiest performance, but today was dismal in all forms. It was absolutely dismal. We had the formation set up, but maybe not the right players in it. We had the experience in the wrong areas of the field, and we also had it on the bench, which is not where we wanted it. And then we kind of could have guessed where Forest was going to be. They've had some tough games and tough results. Whatever their plan was coming into the season clearly hadn't worked. And that vote of confidence that Steve Cooper got by getting that new contract, despite them doing so badly, probably gave them a shot in the arm and a chance to reassess everything they're doing with all of their 20 million players and decide on a new way of playing, especially against the big teams who will have most of the ball. So do we go toe to toe with them, or do we sit back and let them make the mistakes? It seems that today they decided to sit back and let us make the mistakes, and make them aplenty. We did. Not glaring mistakes like the ones at the start of the West Ham game, but mistakes nonetheless in terms of space and in terms of where we were going to put the attacks, and in terms of the adventurousness of the players on the ball. We had our central defender had more touches than several players added together. Van Dijk, he had 120 touches, which is more, I believe, than Carvalho, Trent, Alisson, and Salah combined. Maybe not the best thing to look at, mate. That tells you that we were doing an Arsenal, as we would call it in the old days. We were literally holding on to the ball as long as we could, to walk the ball into the best position to put into the back of the net. In fact, let's not even go to Arsenal. It was a Brendan Rodgers style performance. Not that I'm bashing Brendan Rodgers, but it was a very impotent, insipid, uninspired, and generally directionless attack that went anywhere except where the ball should go in soccer, which is into the box, into players that are causing danger, and then winning that second ball. We didn't do that because we didn't have a first ball in the first place. It went wide, it went to the other side, it went back to the defenders, it went back to the other side, back into the defenders. We tried to pass up into the attackers, who played it back into midfield, who dropped it back, switched it out to a fullback, back into the defense, back to their side, and anything but put the ball into the danger areas. Whether it worked or not, at least keeps the defenders honest and keeps them on their toes, and keeps the attacks unpredictable. And we didn't do that. We made the game easy for Forest, and we made the result harder for us to get the longer it went on, especially when they brought on the extra defenders and went really defensive at the back. They parked the bus, and when teams park the bus against us, we don't seem to have enough, definitely not in midfield. And it seems these days not enough in attack to do something about that. So a tough game overall, really damaging for any hope that we had after the City game and the West Ham game. 3 wins on the trot, being fantastic in the league on for confidence, for momentum. A draw maybe wouldn't have been too bad. An away draw against the struggling relegation threatened team, 1/3 or thereabouts through the season, who desperately need a result at their home ground. It makes a little bit of sense to do that. On the other hand, playing the kind of game we played, it just encourages us as supporters to think that we don't have Klopp's plan, or rather, Klopp doesn't have a plan. He whatever thing worked before with the combination of players he had before, it's not working now. It's consistently falling apart in ways we don't want it to fall apart. And the question is, can Klopp fix it? Does he have it within him to change? We know he's left Mainz. We know he's left Borussia Dortmund when he felt that he could take those teams no further. Are we at that stage with Jurgen Klopp now? Does he look at it and go, I don't know how to fix this. Maybe it's time for someone else. And Klopp is that kind of person. He's the kind of person who thinks more about the club than he does about what he needs. And we probably don't want him to think that, because at some point it's going to be fixable. It's just a matter of when. But it's certainly a problem. We can't keep going for 2 steps forward, 1 step back, without identifying that we need to maybe create something new, maybe go to something different, maybe take the next money that's offered for Mohamed Salah, if anybody ever did, for money, and they start to rebuild and then have proper transition seasons where we know we're going to take new players in, like Nunez, like Diaz, and we're going to give them a season or 2 to gel, and then we come back again. We're back to where we were 4 years ago, 3 years ago. But a transition season like this is almost, I don't want to say unacceptable, but it's unencouraging to see the team that has won the league and won the Champions League, or at least a large portion of it, fall apart, because we've seen it before. We've seen it many times before, and we know that the ending is not always pretty. In the 60s and 70s, Bill Shankly could get away with it, because in those days the managerial length of the managerial tenure tended to be quite long. It tended to be in terms of decades rather than months, and tended to be supported as long as you weren't getting relegated, because there was the champions got into the European Cup, and the second place team maybe got into the Fairs Cup, as it was called then, or the UEFA Cup later on. So there weren't many European places up for grabs. So wherever you finished in the league, if you weren't champions or second place, as long as you weren't in the relegation zone, you were fine. But it's not like that these days. So we have to recognize these transition seasons a lot quicker, I think, and do something about them a lot earlier than we are, and visibly do something, instead of saying we're happy with the team, or saying that we're not looking for players. We kind of know that we have to look for players. We know we need midfielders. We can't keep relying on players coming back from injury. Number one, because it takes them a while to get back into match fitness and back into the mental side of things. And number two, with our players, we don't know when they're going to get injured again or not. We don't know when that's going to happen. And it could happen a few games down the line, or it could happen half a season, or a season and a half if we're lucky. It doesn't tend to be that long. It tends to be play a few games, get injured again, and then we don't have that player anymore. So is that what we have to look at? Do we have to look at calling this a proper transition season and then start to make the moves to make that transition? Or do we just say it's a bad season, there's something not working, and we need to change the plan, if not the players? Or do we fear the worst, and we think maybe Jurgen Klopp is thinking he can't fix it? He doesn't have Will Edwards, and we don't know how the scouting is going. What changed on that side? It'd be easy to say nothing changed, but Michael Edwards was good at his job for a reason. Whatever that reason was, it's not there because he's not there, and it's a people profession. So are we stuck between a rock and a hard place here? It seems we do have to look at something. We do have to change something. We kind of don't want to change too many of the players, because maybe we can get something back out of them. But the players that are injured consistently, maybe we have to look at moving those on and replacing those. And the players that are getting the high wages, and I'm not just talking about Salah here, maybe we need to demand more from them, because at this point they're getting paid for being inconsistent, which is frustrating for the coaching staff, I'm sure, and even more frustrating for the fans. So something has to change, because 2 wins and a loss in the space of a week, with the performance against probably the best team in the league right now, joint best if you want to count Arsenal, before they do the Arsenal thing, and then the worst team in the league. We literally went through the gears in the space of 7 days, and it wasn't pretty. So let us know how you think about that. What your thoughts are. Klopp, is it coming to the end of the line? Is he a travelling Wilbury coming to the end of the line here? Or does it just need to get through this season, see what we can get from it, and then start again next year? Do we rely too much on our loyalty to players that aren't giving us back what we want from them in terms of performance, in terms of consistent appearance, in terms of physical robustness? Is it time to move those players on? And Mohamed Salah, are we getting value for money? It's a big contract. It was a big deal to give him the money we gave him. Are we right as fans to expect at least what he gave us before, or would that be a little bit too churlish to say, you know, you're the highest paid player, so where are the goals, Mo? Is that too much of a demand on a player like that? Do we have to accept that sometimes players have poor seasons, regardless of how much we paid him or how little we paid him? And then finally, what do we do about the aging of the team? It's definitely aging out. Van Dijk is aging out. Milner's aging out. Henderson's aging out. Bobby's aging out. Salah is probably coming close to that part of his career. Do we start replacing it now, or do we try and wring every last drop of talent out of them on our watch before it goes completely for them? Given that at that point, we're probably going to lose all those players at once in terms of the performance levels, except for Milner, obviously, because he'll be there till he's 75, winning the lactate race and putting in those last-ditch tackles in the box in his grandad pants and his walking stick. But yeah, do changes need to be made anywhere? What do we need to do? Comment below, comment on Facebook, comment on our Discord channel. If you're not signed up for it, sign up for it. But a disappointing day all around, especially for those on the West Coast who got up really, really early to watch that game. You'd want a little bit more from that if you're waking up at 5:30 a.m. to watch on a Saturday of all days to watch the game. So give us some comments, give us some likes and subscribes as well on the American Scouser TV channel. We will have the Monday podcast this Monday evening, talk more in depth about the game, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of depth in the conversation from Tamuch and Bickler and Gally. Monday to Friday next week, the coffee morning, the coffee show, morning coffee show is going to be at an hour earlier, 8 a.m. Eastern time, whatever that is in the rest of the continental states, with me and I think a cast of tens or Trevor. I can't figure out who it is. And then Thursday night podcast and the Premier League show and the Fantasy League show all coming up as well. So make sure you like and subscribe down below, hit the bell, etc., etc. Yes, let's all go and drink our miseries into oblivion on this nice Saturday afternoon, which would have been a hell of a lot better if we had a better result. Okay, peace out.